Welcome to the Cowboy Up Podcast, where talk is all about the West. This episode is brought to you by Golden Wings Horseshoes and Cowboy Spirit Radio Network. What can genetic testing tell you about your horse? More than you think. Christa Lafayette, CEO of Etalon Equine Genetics, ran tests on two of Russell's horses and shares the results with him right here, right now.
Well, and it's good to see you. It's warm all over everywhere, right? So we're not alone right now. We've got a longtime guest here. He says, "I'm here because I was out west and I looked, and back in Boston where he lives, he says it's going to be 100, and if it's going to be 100, I might as well go to Tucson. They know what it's like to be hot." So.
Well, I think I like his logic.
I think it makes all kinds of sense to me. You go to some of those places that aren't used to it, and they end up really having a struggle. You know, some of them don't even have ACs. You know?
Yeah.
We of course.
Well, and they think that they're hot when they're no hotter than we are, but we're used to it. So kind of some of it has to do with mental attitude.
Yeah. Oh, well, there's definitely that. And of course there's the dry heat stuff, and there's something to that. But anyway, well, we're doing a revisit, Etalon Equine. We talked about the genetics, and then Christa very, very kindly offered to do a couple of tests for us. And, the website's incredible at Etalon Equine Genetics. I mean, it's unbelievable. And we learned a lot, but then she very kindly did my horse, Rito, and Laura's horse, Lobo. And so we're here to learn about it. And we don't know anything because we just kind of held out to learn right here and now today.
Well, the whole subject is huge, and it's beyond fascinating. It's so interesting. So I'm just thrilled to be here and try to listen today because, you could listen for 20 hours and not even touch the edge of this.
Right. And Christa Lafayette, who was a guest here, it's her company, and Lauren's along because they do a podcast themselves together. And of course, this is a subject that so many horse people love. So welcome, Christa and Lauren. Thanks for coming back and spending time with us.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid that this is not the way I wanted to spend time with you again. I want to be at the ranch, just to be clear.
How heat resistant are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm in Northern California. We've got our 100-degree days. The difference is you have 100-degree days and horses.
Yeah, we do have that. And we're riding early and late. And, it was really, I guess, they told me it was really hot yesterday. I mean, I was out and around. They said it was 100 and
Well, I just figure, I'd have to ride in the morning, then go hang out at the pool. It's very hard, but someone has to do it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of like summer, but, I'm from here. Well, we did a couple of horses, and one thing we're going to learn, my horse, Rito, there's been a debate for years here what his genetics were. He's not a papered horse, so we don't know. And we were told what Lobo was, but it's going to be really interesting to find out. Can we gave you the names, or I forget how it played out.
No, you gave me horse 1 and horse 2. So Why don't I go through what I have?
Yeah.
And then you're going to have to tell me if I got it right, if we got this right in the lab, and if we know which horse is which. So my guess is we'll know right away.
I can't decide whether you're getting tested or we're getting tested here. We haven't told you which horse is which, so maybe we'll find out.
Yeah, my guess is you'll know. They're pretty different. I have, I've got 2 samples here. What I know is they're both boys. I don't know if they're stallions or geldings. What I can tell you is horse number 1. Let me take a look at horse number 1. This is a bay-based horse, but it also has a variant for gray. So depending on how old this horse is, it is either currently graying or possibly all the way gray at this stage. You know which one it is?
Well, I'm not sure that clears it up. My horse is a bay, and he looks like a bay. And he's, we think, 25-ish. And Laura's horse is a gray, and he came here as a gray at roughly 10 years old, and he's pretty much the color he's been.
Excellent. Okay, so that's the one we're going to start with. It sounds like Laura's horse. You know, ladies first.
Yeah.
We're gonna go with this horse. So this one, underneath the gray, is a bay horse, and it also has a copy of what we call non-done primitive markings, which would mean if it was not gray, you'd probably able to see a light sort of stripe, dorsal stripe down the back towards the tail. It's hard to tell if you can see it on the gray. Some people can and some people can't, depending on how old they are and how much they've grayed out. Can you see anything like that?
You know, I'm going to go take a hard look, but I don't have any memory of seeing that. If Laura
okay,
were
well,
busy
if he was all
running
grayed out, it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, he's gray. I mean, he's pretty gray.
So he has got everything on the health panel. I'm going to circle back to that here in a minute. Why I think he's clean for what I would call his breed health panel, and how do I know what that is? Hold that thought. Based on the genetics, I don't know how he was raised or trained or any tragedies or anything, but the DNA indicates he's probably pretty friendly and maybe even all up in your business. He might be a little bit of a busybody. Yes. I don't know if he's hot or not, but he's probably, nose all over the place. Is that true?
Yes. I mean, it not obnoxiously, but as some horses can be, but yes, that is accurate.
Yep, and sometimes there's an interplay of energy, right? But the opposite of this animal would be, so this animal has 2 copies of what we call curiosity in the DNA, and that was what they labeled it in the original study. That is not our study. That's a scientific published paper. But what we find is animals that have 2 copies of this variant they call curiosity, all things being equal, they tend to be pretty nosy and kind of all up in your business. And even if they're spooky and hot, when they spook, they got to turn around and look again. They just can't help themselves.
He's not very spooky.
He's not. I had not seen a horse at your ranch that was spooky. I will tell you that. I don't think they'd make it. They've got a lot of work out there that they've got to do, and spooky doesn't cut it. The opposite of this genotype would be called vigilance. And vigilant animals, they got 1 copy from their mother and 1 vigilant copy from their father. They tend to be sort of aloof to aggressive. They are kind of rules animals, very hardcore in their way of thinking. They have an idea how things are supposed to go, and if they don't, God help you. And those animals, they're not necessarily amateur friendly, but they tend to be, if they're in the right hands, very, very fierce competitors. Kind of like, think of these 2 animals if they were dogs. The curiosity animal would be a golden retriever, and the vigilance animal might be a shepherd.
Right. Well, he's definitely he's certainly consistent with your study or what your
curiosity
results were. Absolutely.
And he is not gated. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then he has an interesting muscle type. He has 1 copy of sprint type, fast 0 to 60, and short distance. And he has 1 copy of endurance type, and that's long distance. And that's a pretty unusual combination, but it's interesting because it's going to play into what we saw in the ancestry. And because these are mystery horses, I think the ancestry here is going to be the most fun part. Just jumping ahead a little bit, I'm going to guess, let me take a look at something really quickly. I'm going to guess that your wife's horse can outlast yours.
They're both not young, and, that's probable. I'm not sure that we have any experience that would prove that for sure, but I would say that is what we would expect.
Let me flip it a little bit. I'm going to guess if you raced your wife's horse and your horse in a short distance, yours would beat hers.
Yes.
But hers would last longer.
Yes. That I would say is almost certainly true.
Okay, so let's jump to ancestry on horse number 1, because this is interesting. Because having seen the large number of animals you all have and the really cool mixes, I love the drafts, by the way. Every time we drove by that draft pen, I was dying.
Yeah. We just got a new one, too, so. And he might be in the vigilant thing, which isn't not a typical draft. He's a little spooky, so I think that's why we own him. But anyway, I'm sorry, I digressed.
No, that's all good. It'll be fun to find out. So this horse that we're looking at, this gray horse, looking at the ancestry, we see an interesting composition. 51% what we call Near East. That's Arabian.
Yep.
The rest of it, 22% thoroughbred, a little bit of draft, a little bit of Iberian. At the end of the day, I'm going to turn over these results to you so you can really peruse them over a glass of wine or beer, whatever your preference is. I'm going to go with this is a Korab.
He's a what?
I'm thinking it's a quarter horse Arabian mix.
That's what we thought. And that's actually how he was sold to us. We bought him as a just to use here at the ranch, and he was a made roping horse. He's not that big, so he's a heeling horse, and he was rodeo ready. I mean, they competed on this horse, and we just bought him because he was affordable, and Laura just really, really liked him, and he ended up in her pen. But our expectation was he was half quarter, half Arabian, or some mix similar.
That's what it looks like. It's pretty consistent on this. Sometimes you can't quite tell. You have to kind of guess because, again, breed isn't really a thing in some animal populations. But the Arabian's pretty clear because the traditional Arabians are incredibly inbred, so their genetic signature is very distinct. So you can pick it out very easily. Same with thoroughbred. And this is pretty glaringly Arabian, half of the genetics in this horse. So it's pretty easy to pick out. And what's interesting is that if we look at animals with similar genetic composition, we see your second horse is listed in here. And not just randomly, but very closely related to this horse. It comes up as a third degree relative. So horse 1 and horse 2 are related.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm. Do you know which one that is, Russell?
Well, she's saying that my horse and Laura's horse are third degree relatives.
So you had both of them tested?
We have both of them tested, and they came from completely different sources. So,
but it's background.
Just a monumental coincidence.
Yeah. Wow.
So
it depends.
Yeah. Is that right?
That depends. The reason it depends is horse number 2. We can jump over to horse number 2, and just briefly going backwards, we can start with ancestry on horse number 2. And this one's almost certainly a quarter horse.
So the debate has always been, and I've been on the side that thought he might have Arabian in him, but certainly more quarter horse. And the other side of that argument is, it's a friendly argument because it's sort of without any real purpose to it, is that he was just straight quarter horse. So is that what you're seeing? Is that he's pretty I
think
pure?
He's quarter horse. He could have maybe great grandsire or granddam had a little more Arabian in him, but looking at the horses he comes up similar to.
Right.
His celebrity match is Inferno 66. And what's interesting about him, if I go back to his individual trait genetics. So he's a bay, but I'm going to hedge that he probably has a pretty distinct white marking, and maybe he's got a blue eye or two. He
doesn't, actually. He's got two brown eyes, and he's got white, but it's not a big wide place. It's kind of.
It's on his face, though, yeah?
Right.
Does he have a sock or two?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's got a copy of Splashed White 1.
And that is?
If he were a stallion and you bred him, depending on what the mare has, he has a 50% chance of throwing Splashed White 1. So Splashed White 1 can make very pretty white markings on the face, some socks, and occasionally blue eyes.
Huh.
And if you bred him to another Splashed White 1 and they both passed it, then the baby would almost certainly have blue eyes, high white socks, and pretty loud face marking. Very pretty. Very pretty mutation.
Interesting.
And so his base color is a bay also. And on him, he has one copy of non-done primitive markings. So you might see kind of a faint, dark stripe down his back toward his tail, maybe.
Yeah, I'll have to look.
Depends on how dark he is.
Yeah, he's kind of a average to dark bay.
And
average.
These same horses we're talking about, how about the characteristics about disposition on them?
So this one also curiosity type. He's also not gated, but I'm going to bet he's beefier than the first horse.
Oh yeah, he's a fairly typical quarter horse looking horse. Not real foundation looking, but kind of classic quarter horse.
Nice big booty.
Yeah.
So on his ancestry, the difference between these two horses is interesting. When I send you these reports, you're going to see a graph on there. Since this is a podcast, it's a little hard to show that, because there's no screen.
Right.
You're going to see a graph on there that is basically a big square. And inside the square are all these little dots. Every dot represents an individual horse that is, quote unquote, a breed. Thoroughbreds, quarter horses, Clydesdales, gypsies, Friesians, you name it, it's on there. And your horse his dot will appear somewhere on that square. And chances are, if he is a certain breed or composition or mix, if you click on the labels next to the square, you'll see things that say like Occult-Heki, Friesian, Gypsy, quarter horse, thoroughbred. If you find his people, his dot will overlay with those dots. So that's kind of how you tell what kind of animal this is most like. And in his case, if you click quarter horses, he comes right up in the quarter horses. Whereas horse number 1 is right between Arabian and quarter horse, like right in the middle, which tells you the genetic content spans right between quarter horse and Arabian. And the other interesting little bit of information is that the inbreeding value on your horse is about 6.5%. That's the actual amount of genomic inbreeding we saw on your horse, which is classic quarter horse. Now, what happens with inbreeding is if you are outcrossed, you're a mutt, your inbreeding goes down, right? Because you're not crossing two genetic contents. Horse number 1 has a negative inbreeding value, is not inbred, which tells me it's a cross.
And which is consistent with our guess and what we were told, So it confirms
horses,
that.
Somebody brings you a horse and you end up buying him. Can you then take the way he performs and track backward and go toward genetics?
No. You could. We can't.
Well,
he's asking me.
No, you can. You can. With this stuff, when we pass this over to you, you're going to have a chance to play around with it. So one of the algorithms is the 5 horses like me. And what that does is it looks for horses in the database that are like your horse.
Right.
broad composition-wise, right? Not necessarily related, but like your horse. And what that means is, let's say you got a really well-bred quarter horse. The chances of the 5 top horses being in the same or close discipline as your horse are very high. In other words, if you have a Western Pleasure quarter horse, the chances of the other 5 matching yours and also being in Western Pleasure or Hunter, something that requires a taller horse, leggier, it's very, very high. Whereas if you had a cutter, it's going to be all cutters.
Yeah, I'll bet. I talk about that at our rodeo, but we're way over. Lynn's pointing at the clock, so we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back. You know, I was watching, we were doing a website review. We're getting a new website here at White Stallion, and they were showing some mounted shooting, you know, when you ride fast on a horse and kill balloons with black powder. And I was thinking of Barb, and I was thinking about how Barb is back competing and winning on her mounted shooting horse who'd been retired until Golden Wings put him back on the competition circuit. I think she's already gotten 2 buckles, one on this formerly retired horse. And I think about our horses, and goldenwingshorseshoes.com is the place to go find this concussion absorbing flexible plastic shoe. Took 10 years for Fred to develop, and these shoes, you know, they don't just put your horse back to work, but they make all his day, all 24 hours, more comfortable, because it's not like us. They don't take their shoes on and off. Those shoes are on, and it just makes their entire life more comfortable. And who doesn't like that? All right. Well, so I think Alan was asking me if I can figure out the genetics, but what you're saying is with Etalon equine genetics, anybody can get all this information and more and look and see. They can click and they're going to see the 5 horses that are similar, and if it's quarter horses, they're probably at least very likely going to be in the same discipline or related discipline. Also, you said something about the celebrity, was it match, not relative?
Yeah, it's a celebrity most like me. So we have some celebrity horses in there, and it will find the one that is most like your horse. And then there's also the pedigree build-up, the Find My Herd. If people keep testing, there's a chance we will find the parents of your horses and their siblings.
How big a database do you have?
It's big. Thousands and thousands and thousands. It's growing every day.
Well, so on horse 2, mine, you said he had Curiosity too. Did he have 2 copies Curiosity, or because he's a little more reticent than the other horse. He'll kind of, you know, he wants to make sure everything's okay, and isn't real spooky, but can in a few instances overreact.
Sure, and reactivity can be different. Remember that behavior is really complex. If somebody tells you you can predict the behavior of an animal by one gene, that is not true. Mm-hmm. This particular gene is in the dopaminergic pathway, and in horses, the correlation they found is the base kind of personality, curious versus vigilant. In other words, were they more willing to approach novel objects, try new things without too much ado, or were they more like, I don't think so, I'm not sure. And interestingly enough, this same gene, if you're talking about vigilance, let's say, in dogs equates to aggression, and in humans they find it in thrill seekers. You know, people who are not great people, but always on the edge for the next rush.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So what else did horse one, my wife's horse, are there other findings that everybody would find interesting?
So there are some health things in here that are interesting. That horse has one copy of the variant for non-sweater's disease. It's called chronic idiopathic anhidrosis risk. And what that means is you want to kind of keep in mind to keep that animal cool under stressful situations. We've actually been working on validating this. So the research indicates that animals that are non-sweaters tend to have 2 copies of this, and then they need a trigger event. Something like a really stressful situation, maybe combined with some sort of medication that didn't agree with them, and then they start to experience episodes of not sweating, which we know leads to bad things, right?
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't had a problem, but we've had it in others, and it's a nightmare.
Yeah, it can be really bad. And if you know that they're predisposed to it, and you can head it off at the pass, keeping them cool, looking out specifically, we've heard feedback about mares who are foaling. Now, we don't have any numbers around that yet, but it's odd that that's been brought up a few times that, she has these 2 variants for non-sweaters, and we've noticed she has trouble regulating when she's foaling. And so they've reported back an extra effort to keep her cool when foaling, which I hadn't even thought of. I don't think any of us have. But you want to think about this sort of, again, in terms of risk management, like the diabetes thing, right? Sure. If you know your parents got late onset diabetes, you got to pay attention and maybe not eat as many Snickers candy bars as you want.
Yeah, no kidding.
Keep your weight down and exercise.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Question on the same line is I'm a novice, or it doesn't matter, and I'm going to go buy a horse. Is it possible to make a list and then draw blood on that horse and see how many genes?
And they pull hair, actually.
They will pull hair.
Yeah.
Same
right.
thing.
So it's even easier.
Yeah. So is that number 1 possible? Number 2, is that advisable?
Like a pre-purchase, you mean?
Yes, absolutely.
Heck yeah. I would do it. I mean, I think part of the issue we're dealing with is genetics has gotten a bad rap because sometimes the registries want to look for these bad things, only these bad things. But we should be looking at all the good things. And furthermore, a horse is a big investment, right? And when you're going to purchase a horse, if I'm looking at 5 warm bloods, maybe I want to ride as an eventer. And one of the ones I'm looking at looks like an eventer, but probably is a better dressage horse. It would behoove me to know that before I buy it.
And your testing would help with that.
It absolutely does. In your guys' case, I think on your ranch there, one of the uses here is looking for animals that are gated. Animals that are gated are easier for amateurs to ride, but they're not great at things like tempi changes and flying leads.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they're in this part of the world, gated horses are not real common. And we have a couple that are, you can see it's somehow in their genetics. And so, you know, it's not something we look for, that's for sure. You know, back to Alan's really good question about pre-purchase. How, if someone pulls the tail hair, I think you needed how many hairs? 15, 20?
We say like 40, like your little
40.
finger.
That's
about the depth, the diameter of your little finger, a little bit more than a pencil.
That's right. And I remember now. And you can do mane hair too if they're over 2. But what's the turnaround? So they get that hair into you guys quickly. When in a pre-purchase situation would they get some results?
So our typical service is not slow. It's like 5 to 7 work days. But if they've got a pre-purchase and they let us know, we can turn it around, depending on what they want to look at, we can turn it around in 2 days.
Well, right. Let me ask a question. Do you have a predisposed set of traits that you would test for? You know, I'm about to buy a horse, and I say, okay, I want to pull some blood and look for these traits. Do you have a set of 10 traits that you would recommend that I look for, or you might send it in and say, tell me what you find, or how does that work? Does the disposition drive the test, or does the test drive the disposition? Which is?
It kind of depends. I know that's the worst answer of all, but if you're calling me and you're saying, look, I'm looking at a reiner, I'm going to recommend a different test set than I would if you were an eventer, right? Or a spotted horse, or a horse from Europe. But that is why we like to plan ahead. We like to say, if you're going to look at these candidates, get us the hair as soon as you can. We just run the big panel and don't make any specific requests, because we find all kinds of surprises all the time. We find Arabian variants and diseases and attributes in stock horses and quarter horses and paint horses, and we find vice versa. We find fragile foal syndrome, not in warm bloods. We find mixed muscle type and mixed gatedness in horses that shouldn't have it. Back to your point about not seeing gated horses too much on the ranch, it's there. You just don't know it. That's the horse that might give you trouble changing leads, and you can't figure out why. It's because they've got one gate gene.
Interesting. Well, I mean, I think Alan's question has just hit such a bullseye here, because you've also now said that if you're looking at a reiner versus an eventer, I think that was your example, that you're gonna suggest a different panel. I mean, really, in the scheme of life, if somebody goes and does a real vet check on a pricier horse, one where they're going to invest some real money, that's I've never seen a horse pass a vet exam completely, but number two, that's a lot of money. Your tests are really affordable and might, in the bigger picture, be more important. I mean, this is a really important thing for people to entertain.
That's exactly why I asked that question. Yeah,
exactly. I think
should that become kind of part of the pre-purchase rigmarole that you do when you're going to look for a horse to buy, or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
clearly we think so, but we're kind of biased, right? So.
Yeah, you better be. So, in either of our horses, we had the one marker, I forget the term, but for the sweating disorder in horse one. Any other health things that we should be looking for on these two guys? They made it pretty far in life. They're both about 25. And I
mean, I got to tell you, their health reports are pretty boring.
Yeah, that's
they look
news.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they look really good. Let me take a look at one of them here. Let's pretend they were breeding stallions for a minute. And let me see if they had anything going on with heritable fertility or anything here. One of them, horse 2. So your horse is a little bit more susceptible to the neurological form of EHV, right? So when an EHV outbreak happens, keep your horse away from it. The other one's not as susceptible, but yours is.
So you actually genetically can see a susceptibility to EHV?
Yes.
Wow.
And you remember during the COVID pandemic, you could be standing in a grocery store with kind of a little bit of a runny nose and have COVID and have no idea, right?
Sure.
Meanwhile, your friend is on a ventilator.
Yep.
On death's doorstep. A lot of viruses, bacteria, parasites even, prefer certain individuals over others based on genotype, blood type, tissue type. It's a thing.
Well, that's something I kind of, I guess, inferred just by what you pointed out, but I'm just astonished that your testing can take us there. And EHV is a big deal. And I assume that's all types, whether it's paralytic or respiratory or aborted. It's just
No, this one is specific to the neurological form.
Oh, no kidding.
So this is going to tell you if you're at high risk for getting the neurological onset symptoms,
kidding.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't want it.
No, well, we've had it here, and that we had it here years ago. I mean, when our vet couldn't even recognize it. They had to send studies all over the country because it was so much more the respiratory, and the other horses had shown some other symptoms. So we've had it here, and we vaccinate for people. People seem to call it equine herpes virus now, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's rhinopneumonitis. Yep. It's and there's type 1-4 and something else, and generally it's respiratory, but the paralytic form is the one that kills horses. And we vaccinate 4 times a year for it because we've had it. So I've got to go give my horse a shot right now. So I think I'm a little behind. So that's important stuff. Anything else in there on the health side of the equation?
No, like I said, these horses are quite healthy. They don't even if they were breeding stallions, they don't even have any kind of like subfertility or anything that I can see on here that would affect them. So they're, if I had to guess, I would guess they are probably doing quite well and probably will make it to a ripe old age. But that's based on, it looks like a lot of information, but in reality, genetics is sort of in its infancy stage.
Yeah. No, they're doing well. Laura's horse needs dentures. I don't know if you know any equine denture makers. He has to eat pretty soft food, but other than that,
right?
Yeah, he doesn't have a lot.
Can you get that cured, or?
No, I'm joking. He just doesn't have a lot of teeth left, so he's eating soft food. But
well, someone in Japan is making people regrow teeth. Did you know that?
I read something that it was really early, I thought. But is it moving along?
They estimate somewhere between 6 and 8 years we'll be able to regrow teeth.
Wow.
How weird is that?
Wow.
That's incredible. Are they going to do selective right front tooth versus, or do you have to pull all the rest and get them all to grow?
Yeah.
Or,
just
how
get
does
a
that
whole
work?
new set.
I don't know. I'm scared. Like, what if I regrew the teeth and they were, yellow or buck teeth or big spaces or I don't know.
Yeah, that would be something. I'm 72 and I have to have braces because they came in wrong. So
maybe you can just get fangs. I would get fangs.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
So I'm sitting here thinking our good friend Bob Anderson, who has Tucson Mountain Stables here at the ranch, takes the public out riding. He's got a half draft stallion. We're going to breed him to a few of our mares because we just can't find half drafts. And dude ranches need half drafts. It's just a reality. So I'm going to go over there and steal some hair off that stallion and get it over to Etalon Equine Genetics because I want to know if this guy is something we want breeding our mares. I'm right, aren't I? That's like the no-brainer of all time. I should get him tested.
Well, that brings up a question. Do they have a chart and everything 1 to 15 is a no-go if they don't pass, and then beyond that is go ahead and buy them? Does it work like that?
It doesn't really work like that, does it? But I mean, you're going to have markers that are going to say to you, this is an issue, right? Because you said health panel.
We can even go a step further than that. If you've tested the stallion and let's say you've tested the mares, you could mock breed them in the Build-A-Horse app and see what you're going to get.
And once again, that's something I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to, there's so many and affordable opportunities through your company to avoid problems. And it's kind of right there for them to do. So Etalon Equine Genetics, the website, tell us where do they go?
Our website is etalondx.com, also on all social media. And then we also have a podcast of our own called Genetics Unbridled, where we talk about all these things on our episodes.
Okay, go through it slower one more time.
Maybe spell it.
Yeah, so Etalon, EtalonDX.com.
And then your podcast is?
Our podcast is called Genetics Unbridled.
Oh, that's perfect. Genetics Unbridled. All right.
We have a lot of fun talking with our veterinary advisors and athlete advisors, and we get into all the nitty-gritty of all the temperament and ancestry. There's a lot to learn.
And that's you too, right? Lauren and Christa, yep. and that's on all the platforms. And it's easy to find, I'm sure.
It is. And we're actually looking forward to hosting more ranchers. We think that this is a way to sort of give voice to what's actually going on at the ranches. And this goes down a whole big rabbit hole about all the regulations and food production and what's realistic and what isn't. And we kind of want to give a voice to those folks to talk about what their experiences are and what will actually help make ranch life better.
Well, you know, just again, I've said it twice now. Alan really kind of hit on a real, you know, honestly, I saw this more as just fun, you know. Is Lobo half Arabian and quarter horse? Or isn't he? Well, as it worked out, he was. Does my horse have some Arabian? Well, it works out probably not. That's okay. It's fun. But really, we learned that we've got to look at Lobo and be aware that he might have a sweating disorder. As you said, it can be triggered. So we've got to, you know, especially as he ages, we've got to be more aware. And if we're looking at buying particularly a performance level horse, we have opportunities to assess whether that's a good purchase or not. And once you bought them, you usually bought them. So it's good to get a little hair to the Etalon Equine Genetics before you take that big step.
That's where I was coming from.
Yeah.
Is should this not be every horse you're going to buy, put them through the test?
Yeah, and even in our business, dude ranching,
I'm talking for you.
And people are paying more and more and more for these horses. And if they get one of these double vigilant, it's probably not going to be the top of their herd for guests. So thanks for joining us. Etalon Equine Genetics and EtalonDX.com. Genetics Unbridled is the podcast. It's just perfect. And we're going to get you to the Dude Ranchers Association and help people. It's hard buying guest horses, and
for sure.
You're going to give us a little advantage, so maybe a big advantage.
Well, it's when you buy a guest horse.
We will do everything we can. I cannot tell you what a pleasure it was to see my New York City husband wearing a cowboy hat, sunglasses, and galloping through the desert at your ranch. That was spectacular. And he actually said he'd go again on purpose.
Well,
and to help all the bruises heal up, or what?
And that's thanks to those horses.
We just had a ball sorting the cattle and stuff. That was just, it was awesome.
Well, thank you, and thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having us. What a privilege.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Now I've got to come over and go ride.
I think it's a work-related thing, right?
I think so, too.
Do it.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Wow, what a story, and thank you all. As I oftentimes say, you learn more here by accident than most places by design. Yes, this is the Cowboy Up Podcast. My name is Stan the Radio Man. It's my privilege and my pleasure to help produce this program and bring it to you. I am the founder and the creator, and hopefully a partner with you in what we call the Cowboy Spirit Radio Network. You see, the podcasting phenomenon is growing around the world, and more people, just like you, just like Russell and Alan, are able to put together a program of thoughts, entertainment, wisdom, insight, in a way that helps share some real wisdom and perhaps a way to promote their life and their business and the things they would like to offer to the world. Yes, that's what podcasting can do for you. And we'd like to do that for you. Now, particularly if you're very much involved, as the people here are, in the Western way of life, in the cowboy stories, about what it was to make it and not get broken in pieces by the ways of the Western world. If you have those kind of stories, we'd love to hear from you too. But whatever it might be, there's a good chance that the wisdom you have and the things you've learned can benefit somebody else. So let's see if we can get you on the radio. So why don't you reach out to me at stanhouston@gmail.com, stanhouston@gmail.com, and let's see if perhaps this is the time right now that you'll be telling your story on the radio.
All right, horse lovers, go pull those tail hairs and get your horse tested, and let us know if you get any surprises. A cowboy shout out to Stan Houston's production team. Next week, our spotlight shines on Kirk Ellis, who wrote the screenplay for the new miniseries Franklin, starring Michael Douglas and streaming on Apple. Until then, I'm Lynn Weezy Sneed, reminding you to sit tall and ride safe.